Verdun has always been a very solid FPS title, roaming into the World War I era like not many really have done before, at least to some high-level standards. Releasing in 2015 under the banner of M2H and Blackmill Games, it's done alright for itself. It's the first in the World War I series. Later in 2017, the release of Tannenberg, a look on the Eastern Front, less trench fighting, way more open, and soon this year we should be getting Isonzo, going to the Italian Alps and seeing where it takes us, fighting in a completely new and different terrain with completely new different factions, artillery, machine gunners, and destructible buildings. I cannot wait for it. But I thought I'd go back, check how Verdun's doing, and whether it's even worth playing in 2022. And for such a small indie game, I'm interested to see how well it holds up. Logging onto the servers, you start to see the first issue. There is somewhat a lack of player base. I think Verdun, even on its release in 2015, was somewhat underrated. It had highs of 4,000 to 6,000 concurrent players, and yes, while there were spikes through its updates and expansions, now there's a pretty steady 50 to 200 concurrent players at any one time in a 24-hour period. Now, that might sound pretty low to some people, and in terms of like a full multiplayer shooter, it's not all that active, but Verdun has a good get around for this, making it not so detrimental to your actual gameplay. Hopping into a game though, what you'll see is the frontline modes is the most populated, but of course this is expected. This is the Verdun shining glory of a game mode. Trenches, fighting from one place to another, pushing and pulling with smoke attacks, gas attacks, anything you can think of, really replicating the horrors of the First World War. The servers, what you'll mostly find is not much. If you get a good time in the evenings, you might find one server that is pretty or almost full, and then you might have a few that have a small number of players on, but most of the time you're not going to be getting all that much in terms of a choice of server. You're probably just going to have one that you've got to play on, or at least that's what I've seen from an EU perspective. Jumping on though, there's still a lot that can be gained from playing this game. It still kind of feels the same as at launch from this workaround that I mentioned, and that is the inclusion of bots. You wouldn't really know they were bots just from playing it. Holding tab, they come up as normal named soldiers. They don't say AI or bot next to them, but of course you will be able to kill them a little bit easier. However, they are still pretty good at shooting. You will sometimes get that infuriating snipe in the head as you poke your head above the parapet, but that kind of feels like it's how it should be in a game like Verdun. But all in all, I think the bots are a really good addition, and it has made this game last way longer than I guess it really would have without them. The small player base means that the sides wouldn't have filled up if it wasn't for having the possibility of 64 bots on a server if needs be. And because of this, it still feels very immersive. It still feels like there's people all around you. You're able to still use a role like an officer to call in strikes without having to worry about filling up the machine gun or the SMG or the rifleman slots in your squad, because the AI will do that for you. And whilst I doubt there are going to be many, if any at all, updates coming out for Verdun in the future, there are a large array of maps that you can get your hands on. Of course, developers did somewhat limit themselves to focusing on this one battle in World War I, but there's still a kind of good array. Most of it will be trench fighting, however. And that takes us on to Tannenberg, which I thought that I would try out whilst I was in this World War I mood. That game is pretty similar, however it is way less populated than the initial First Western Front title. But once again, it has bots in it, so you're not really going to notice the lower population. You'll get some much more open field attacks with the Russians jumping into potholes. There is some trench warfare, but a lot of it is fighting across open ground, making you very susceptible to sniper fire, which you do have to watch out for. But there is a lot more things like machine guns and heavy emplacements that you can hop onto that just lie around for any soldier to get their hands on. Both games in all are still great. Are they the AAA FPS that most people come to expect these days? No, but they still hold their own niche. They're not the best looking games in the world. The gun control is still quite clunky, but with the mechanics of most of the time a one-shot kill to anyone, it doesn't matter all that much. Focusing way more on bolt action rifles than anything else. The gunplay, whilst not the most pristine thing in the world, works well for what they're going for here. And this leads me on to Isonzo. Now, I don't even know if I should be saying this, but I have played it in some playtests in the past. Of course, I won't be showing anything from that. I'm not allowed to record it. I'm not even allowed to say if it's any any good or not. But one thing I can say from the trailers we are shown, the whole Alpine warfare will lead us into some way more unique and a better variety of gameplay. I think the more open stuff of Tannenberg really was great for the franchise. Whilst it isn't as popular as Verdun was, at least for me, I really enjoyed it a lot more. And I think Isonzo is just going to take that to the next level. Much bigger scales, fighting throughout valleys, mountains, and in towns, having destructible things like blowing up bridges as we've seen in the trailer, and being able to use mortars, even being able to use an engineer class to cut down barbed wire. Some cool additions there that I cannot wait for. But let me know what you think. Have you played Verdun recently, and do you still think it holds up to this day? If you haven't already, go and check out my main channel video where I go over the rise and fall of the game, its history from its inception to where it is now. But leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, leave a dislike if you didn't, but subscribe to the FPS channel for more content like this. But until then, I will see you in the next one.